Welcome to Lead Different, the podcast that redefines leadership and challenges the status quo. Hosted by Daniel Dominguez, founder and CEO of Why Not Leadership. This show is your compass to becoming a better leader through the power of self-awareness. Good leaders foster teams that are engaged, empowered, and energized. Join us on this transformative journey as we equip you with the tools and insights to lead different. Get ready to challenge the ordinary and embrace self-aware leadership. This is Lead Different.
Subscribe now. Discover a new era of leadership. Lead different, because great leaders change the world.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lead Different podcast. We are recording live, and we have an amazing guest for you today, Kristen Smith. She is the executive director of the Catholic Community Foundation of Mid-Michigan, where she leads efforts to inspire charitable giving and steward resources that support parishes, schools, and ministries across the Diocese of Saginaw. With a mission grounded in faith and community impact, she ensures donor generosity is managed responsibly and invested according to Catholic values, helping create a legacy of service and spiritual growth for generations to come. I met Kristen at the National Symposium of Catholic Foundation CEOs, and we've had a continuing conversation since then. I think you guys will enjoy learning about Kristen. She's got an amazing background, and she is dedicated to the job that she does today. So I'd like to welcome Kristen to the stage. Hello, Kristen. How are you?
Hello, Dan. Very good. Thank you. How are you?
I am excited to talk to you. It was so fun to spend some time with you and get to know you in Wisconsin during the Catholic CEO Symposium and Leadership Symposium. I know not all of you are CEOs, some of you are executive directors, but everybody that was there leads a Catholic foundation in one way or another. And you're one of those nice people that I met. And as we've continued to have a conversation since then, I've really enjoyed getting to know you. And I thought the leaders that follow the Lead Different podcast could benefit from learning a little bit about your mission, the way you lead. And there's a lot of things that you do, I think, that will resonate with our leaders. So thank you for being on, Kristen.
Oh, thank you, Dan. It was a beautiful event in Wisconsin, and we had so many blessings and opportunities to fellowship and meet folks and just really share who we are, what we do, and how we can work together to build our leadership and our faith in the Catholic community.
Yeah. What is it? How many years have you been going to that meeting, Kristen?
I believe 4 now, maybe 5, but I'd have to look back.
Yeah. So 4 or 5 years, everybody has every industry has these types of meetings. And we all get something different, right? Your doctors get together, lawyers get together, which you have a law background, which we definitely want to talk about. What's the most important thing you get out of those meetings when you're there with the rest of the folks from around the country that do what you do?
Fellowship in the ministry of Catholic stewardship, or stewardship in general. Leading an organization, you sometimes feel like, whoa, who else is out there? Right. And when you find your folks who do the same thing, you've got a community, even if they're 1,000 miles away, 100 miles away. And that makes a big difference when you're in a leadership position.
Yeah. As they say, it's lonely at the top, right, Kristen? So when you're back in Saginaw running your own foundation, it's not, you don't have another CEO or another executive director that's right next door you can run ideas by, but you get that opportunity once a year. I love that you said, whether you're 100 miles away or 1,000 miles away, you're able to reach out. So you make those connections, you make those initial contacts, and then you follow up with them. What's the biggest challenge that you're seeing right now, or that you guys are encountering right now in the fundraising space? And it's not necessarily fundraising that you do, it's more managing the funds, right? You find the donors and then you're managing for perpetuity. Tell us a little bit about how that's different than other foundations.
So in the Catholic Community Foundation environment, we are challenged on both sides of finding the donors is sometimes the biggest challenge based upon what diocese you work in. Some dioceses are very good at teaching stewardship, others are not. And so folks, when you approach them, if they haven't heard anything about stewardship or that, God gives all good gifts, It's a little bit challenging. But then again, God provides, and people who want to give find us. So there's a two-edged coin to that. In regards to managing the funds, I would say from my perspective, we have really good investment committee. We have a great fund manager who consults with us about our funds. And we also belong to what's called the National Catholic Investment Pool. So our challenges might not be the same as another organization, because in Michigan, most of your Catholic organizations, dioceses, and foundations pool their money and have a couple $2 billion in purchasing power. So I'm very confident in our way in which we manage those funds, because we have a great crew and we're working with a lot of people.
Excellent. Kristen, so the other part of that question that I started with, and then I went away from it because I wanted to hear more about how you're managing. Tell us the biggest challenge that you're seeing, either yourself or you're hearing from your colleagues since that meeting in May. What's the biggest challenge you guys are facing right now?
So as a Catholic organization and other Catholic organizations, I believe what I heard the most of all of us facing are finding the donors, making sure the donors find us. Oftentimes, donors will know about this community, this nonprofit, or that nonprofit. And foundations are very distinguished from a general community nonprofit. For instance, we have food banks. Those are nonprofits. People give to food banks, and they give an immediate return. People get fed immediately. Right. What challenges us as a foundation is, as I would like to quote one of my, the Vicar General here in the Diocese of Saginaw, really what foundations do are long-term investments. So folks who leave an endowment or a legacy gift to the foundation can continue to give their Sunday envelopes from heaven. Mm-hmm. So I like that. Yeah, we like to think of it that way, and that's really what it is. And yet, working with folks who haven't really thought about end-of-life giving and leaving a legacy and their faith continuing beyond the grave, and while they're hopefully in purgatory and making it to heaven, it's an education for donors who haven't thought about it that way. And that is a challenge.
Yeah, I can see where education is a big part of what you do. I know I work with Ed locally at the Catholic Foundation of the Archdiocese of Santa Fe, and he's so good about making himself available and going out to the community and just letting people know how this works. But I love the never-ending perpetuity of it, these perpetual funds. And for those people that aren't aware of what that looks like, would you mind giving us because I haven't had Ed on yet, so I'd love to hear your definition of, if you're explaining to someone how these endowments are perpetual and what that means for somebody who's making a big donation or even a small donation, because that fund continues to give forever.
Yes. Well, think of it as an IRA. When you plan for retirement, you put money away so you can use it later. A foundation holds that money for later use by the parish, by your school, by your favorite ministry, but it never ends, because perpetuity means it's an IRA that never has to be closed, because the foundation, is in perpetuity as well as a corporation. So my simple 3-minute elevator speech, it's the IRA for the church.
Yeah. So it's an IRA for the church, and it also, the principle never goes away. That's the other exactly cool thing, right?
Yeah, that's the detail for it. So when a donation is made to the foundation, that donation is considered to establish the principle. The principle is what is invested. And anytime there's a donation, that donation becomes part of the principle. So that principle is invested in Catholic compliant, meaning socially screened investments that are consistent with our Catholic faith, magisterium, and a guideline set forth by the USCCB, United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. And so that principle then is invested. Mm-hmm. You have a great year, you make 10% on the money, your fund grows. Now, the key to a endowment is that you take only the part of the growth, a portion of the growth, and that's what gets distributed back to the church, the school, the ministry. So then therefore, if you start with 100,000 and you make 10%, you have 110,000. Mm-hmm. But the endowment may say, but every year we want 4% of that to go back to go to the church, to go to the school. So therefore you make a distribution of $4,000, and now the fund balance not only has the 100,000, but the 6,000 that wasn't dispersed, so that each year it keeps growing and growing. And eventually, I mean, we have some funds that have close to $2 million in them. So the 4% each year is almost $80,000 towards that church's immediate needs. And that takes time, which is what donors would rather sometimes see. I want an immediate, like, do it now, where we have to show them how it really makes a difference in the future.
Yeah. How do you approach that conversation? Because I'm sure we're all, in today's era of we want it now. Nobody waits to go read a book or go look it up in the library. Everybody's got these gadgets in their hands. So if they can't figure out if a celebrity is still alive, you can look it up immediately and find out, okay, you're right. They did die last year, or they're still alive. So in this era of instant gratification, what's the best argument you make for people investing long-term? And I know there's a couple of ways that people do it, but what's the best way to illustrate to someone how their gift makes a difference in perpetuity?
So you can show them graphs, you can show them numbers, you can show them projections. And frankly, that's not convincing. What's really convincing is that they trust what you're going to do, that when they make a donation or an investment into an endowment, that's going to be there 20, 30, 40 years from now, because the foundation is transparent. It says what it's going to do, and it does it, and they can trust. So frankly, it's not the numbers. It's really a ministry where you have to build that into their faith, so that the donor understands that their faith means more than just today. Oftentimes, I do find, though, when I'm working with organizations, there will be one or two people that really get it. They are the ones who actually do the convincing. I just stand by and say, here we are. Here's our processes. Here's what you can count on. You can trust us. Exactly, you can trust us. But they need to know and have faith and confidence that what they're doing is going to be meaningful and have a lasting impact.
That's really good. You've mentioned trust a few times, so this is probably a good time to go over for our guests and for our listeners who are our YOS coaches, fellow YOS experienced people. A lot of our folks that watch have taken the YOS, and that's why they're interested in the Lead Different podcast, because we talk to leaders, and we also unpack that. Whenever we have a chance, we unpack that for them and for the audience. So Kristen's why is make sense. And you've heard her, it's interesting how we hear those words, right? We've heard those words a few times already from you. So her why is to make sense of the complex and challenging. And what we know about that is she's a problem solver. She loves solving problems. And so being in a position where there are certain challenges that are there, she probably loves to dig in and figure out, okay, what's the solution? How she does it, so let's get to her how, is by clarifying. Kristen is very clear on creating clarity, not only for her clients, her donors, her staff, the people that she works with. She probably doesn't make fast decisions, but she's very clear. You always know exactly what is happening, and she thrives on providing people clarity. So how she makes sense of things for people is by providing clarity. And you've heard it a few times just in the last few minutes. Her what is trust. Ultimately, what Kristen delivers are solutions you can trust. She's someone that thrives on being dependable, counts on others to be dependable. And if she says she's going to do something, she'll do it. So you had an opportunity to learn that about yourself at the conference. We had some follow-up calls. Kristen, has that made a difference for you in how you present yourself or how you talk about what you bring to the table?
It has. I mean, in a way, when I read the clarity, the understanding, and trust, it kind of stopped me in my tracks. I'm like, whoa, somebody gets me. And of course, it was me answering the questions for the Why Not Leadership assessment. And so going forward, what I've found to be really helpful is not only did it identify the strengths, but it also identified the weaknesses and where my challenges are. And that's really where I've walked with this why not leadership model, and focusing in on the challenges so that they aren't challenges anymore. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So when you say focusing on the challenges, so there are challenges to being a make sense person, being able to take in lots of information and quickly digesting it and coming up with solutions is a gift. It's a total gift, but not everybody has it. And you've probably your whole life noticed that people just don't process information as quickly as you do, right, Kristen?
I believe that is very true.
Yeah. And of course, and you've got a legal background, so you're also an attorney. So I'm sure that was very helpful in trying cases, in interpreting law quickly, finding cases that supporting documentation, research. What's the disadvantage of that is that not everybody can keep up with you, right? So how do you overcome that challenge?
So yes, that challenge is with patience. And once you identify the challenge, I'm like, okay, I get it. It's clear. I understand it. And now I need to trust myself as well to say, okay, slow down. Not keep it simple, but take it one step at a time until you see the light bulbs going off, and in a way lead to the result that you're hoping to reach. And that's not unlike it was when I was doing jury trials. And frankly, I didn't see it in the context of, okay, now I'm doing this. So just continue that means of keeping it slow and then leading to where you'd like them to find themselves. So patience and acknowledging that it takes time, and people do need to learn according to their learning style. Where I may think of things one way and see it, they may need to go down a couple different paths before they come to the same point. So helping lead them through those paths, so when we all come together, it's like, celebrate, we got it.
Right. Interesting that you own two whys that are almost opposite, and I wouldn't say not necessarily opposite. They're complementary, and that makes sense. Is all about finding answers, but clarify is all about asking questions. And again, what a great talent to have when you were in your law career, because you clarify by asking questions, and so you're probably really good at asking those second and third level questions. Probably serves you well in your current role as you're working with folks establishing endowments or working with you for investments, because you're probably really good at getting to their motivations and asking the right questions. So that's the gift, right? In looking for clarity. The challenge is sometimes you might ask more questions than people are ready to answer. So has that been a challenge for you, or how do you overcome that thirst for clarity that sometimes people are ready to move on and say, hey, can I just give you what I already gave you?
Yeah. So interesting is in the environment, in the foundation, in the ministry of journeying with folks who want to give a donation to their church or the faith. I'm a listener. Truly, in this ministry, listening is the key. And continue to listen and listen and listen while gathering data, gathering what you're hearing, trying to put it all together. So I would say 90% of what I do in the beginning is listening. Mm-hmm. And that could be 2, 3, 4, 5 meetings where we just get together, have lunch, start talking about things. And I find the more I listen, they ask me questions. Well, tell me about this. Tell me about this. Share more about this. So as I share, I sometimes see the light bulbs going off or more thinking, and they continue to ask questions. So it's almost in a reversal role when you're in ministry. In ministry, listening is the key to gathering the data. And then as we begin to actually formalize, say, an endowment agreement, that's where I come in and start going, well, would you like this or would you like this? And what about this? What if that happens? What would you like to do here? So once all the data is gathered, then I shift gears when we get more into defining how and what they want to give for. And that truly takes just as much time. It takes, another 2 or 3 meetings, sometimes 4 meetings where they've had time to think about it. We've asked questions, we've shared. So it's thoroughly enjoyable. It's a ministry that I'm just so happy to be where I am in this ministry that God has put me here.
Tell us about that path, Kristen. I think it'd be good for our listeners to hear. How do you go from being an attorney to leading a Catholic foundation in Michigan? Tell us where the interest came from, and then the other thing. So let's start with the story, and then I'd like to talk about what transferred over. What skills do you transfer over from practicing law to running a foundation? But tell us how you ended up going from an attorney, or take us from coming out of law school, and what'd you do, and then how much time did you spend there before you decided to come into this ministry?
Yeah, so I'll get right there. It wasn't my decision. It was God's call. We'll put it that way. And I didn't understand it was God's call until later in life. So, starting with law school, there's always been a core in me. I want to know the truth. What is the truth? And so it seemed to me as though that's one of the primary responsibilities of a lawyer, is to get to the truth so that you can make a decision and the truth prevails. Went to law school, local law school, went to the local college 4 years, got out of law school, had an undergraduate in accounting, kept going and became a CPA as well. And because I just lived down the street from the Capitol, I ended up becoming an assistant attorney general for the state of Michigan. Interestingly enough, the person who I was working for before that was the auditor general of the state of Michigan. And when I told him that I wanted to, go to the attorney general's office, he shared with me that he had gone to law school and never followed through with his desire to be practicing law. So that was kind of like wow, that was okay, let's go for it. So I practiced law for the attorney general for about 18 years. And there came a point where it was like, you know what? I think it's time to make a move. Like I could have stayed with the state. It would have been a cushy retirement. I probably would have been retired by now, frankly. And so I made a decision that was crystallizing in everything I did, how I saw things. And I went to work for a corporation as a corporate attorney, the vice president corporate counsel. And this organization had never had an internal counsel. They'd always hired outside counsel. And I spent 3 years there just bringing to it the necessary in-house counsel type of things you do, document retention manuals, just a lot of processes and clarity about how things work. And there came a point where I guess you would say, the parent company, that's what you'd call it. The parent company decided that they were going to do some slimming down at the corporate level of their subsidiaries. And of course, I think as Shakespeare goes, the attorneys are the first to go. So I was sitting in my office one day going, wow, okay, what's next, Lord? Like, what do we do now? And I ended up calling a friend of mine who I'd worked with for several years. And I said, guess what? I'm a free agent. They're letting go of all their attorneys and all their companies. And he had reminded me that when we were practicing at the Attorney General's office, I used to say, when I retire, I want to work for the church. And he reminded me of that day. I thought, whoa, what does this mean? I have no idea what it means. Like, what does this mean? I'm going to work for the church. Where am I going to go? So needless to say, the ladies out there may understand this. Went home, cleaned every closet, organized every kitchen shelf, just took up my time with just keeping busy for a while, did a few small legal jobs, and finally decided, well, we just can't sit around. And I didn't want to go back to practice law. I knew that was behind me. I'm like, you know what? No, I'm done with that. Had plenty of years. It's a different environment. So I went to my pastor and I said, hey, haven't got much going on right now. Would you like some help around the office? And he said, sure, there's some lady down the hall working on a project. Go see if you can help her. Well, it turned out to be one of the campaign directors for the Diocese of Lansing's first ever endowment campaign. It was about a $65 million campaign. I just showed up, just started stuffing envelopes and started paying attention to the letters. I'm like, ooh, that's to Mr. and Mrs. Jones, but Mr. Jones passed away last year. We shouldn't send a letter out that says Mr. and Mrs. Jones. Oh my gosh, stop the bus. So I spent several days fixing letters until we were up to like 200 or 300 letters that were just wrong. And the woman who I was working for, stopped me one day and said, "Who are you? Where are you from? And would you like a job?" It was just like that. And I'm like, well, as a matter of fact, are you serious? Like, yes. And so we shared for a while. She got me in touch with her boss. There was a Zip recruiting type of application. We did a Zoom interview, and he asked me then towards the end of the interview, what salary do you want? I said, you know what? Pray about it. I'm going to say, you just pray about it. Let me know. I wasn't sure what to ask. I just thought, God, take care of this. So literally the next day I was offered the position at exactly how much I needed to continue to to pay the mortgage, pay the utilities, keep my kids in school, and a little bit of, pay for the basics, right? And I thought, okay, this is something else. So within 3 months, I was assigned to, 4 or 5 parishes, working with 3 or 4 pastors, and in a realm of 18 months, those pastors with my assistants, they lead and it's their parishes, about $5.6 million in about 18 months.
Wow.
And it truly was amazing just to be on the journey. And I don't take any credit for it other than I was there. I put in place what we, the process. Right. And I was just like, whoa, look what just happened. Like, I didn't do this. Like, oh my gosh, God, you're totally in charge. So, that led to, more work for the parish when they left. The organization wanted me to travel with them and go to their next diocese. I'm like, nope, I got 2 kids in high school. I need to stay home. Right. Well, went back to the pastor and I said, hey, all right, what's next? Like, what are we going to do next? So he ended up hiring me as the business manager for the church. And of course, I went in and put processes in place and, purged documents that were 50 years old that nobody wanted to throw out. And that too came to an end because that pastor, that priest became a bishop. Mm. So I'm like, what happens when, you have a new pastor, things change. And it did a little bit. We did another mini capital campaign, but I knew I was like, I think time is up here. I just kind of felt like it. Well, in the background, the folks up here in Saginaw had been interviewing me for about a year or so to help them with development. And every time there was an interview, then there was like 2 or 3 months that had passed. I'm like, okay, well, Lord, you didn't want that. I don't know what else is next. Well, there was a series of unfortunate events here. And the worst of which, they lost their bishop. So of course they're going to drop everything and, not going to move forward with hiring. Obviously the priorities were something different. Well, then jump forward to, what was it? 2019? No. Yes. I don't remember. Some years ago. Yeah. Right. 2019, somewhere in there. I got a call from the person who was directing all of the interviews, and I was told that they were going in another direction so that they wouldn't be hiring a development director. And I thought, okay, Lord, what's going on? Like, got to pay the bills. Like, what do you have planned? And I hung up the phone and I thought, whoa, no, this can't be the end. There's got to be something else going on. So I called her back and I said, hey, by the way, what about that foundation? Weren't they part of the interview process? Have they hired anyone yet? Are they looking for someone? And lo and behold, I got a call back. They sure were. During the interview with the foundation leadership, they asked me a question about, how do I feel about how long this has taken? And, I have no idea where this answer came from, but it just rolled off my lips. I said, well, Jesus is coming back, but it's been a couple thousand years, so I understand the church works a little slow. And just about everybody was rolling in their chair, laughing. I thought, okay, Lord, thank you, Jesus. Oh my gosh, that was a great answer. I didn't say it out loud, but I thought, okay, all right, what happens next now? So that was fantastic. The beginning. Yeah, that was the beginning.
Yeah. I want to, boy, thank you for sharing that story, because there's a lot in there. So I'm going to dig into a couple of things.
Sure.
The most important one is you mentioned your faith so many times and trusting God. That's easy to do when things are going well, right? When you're an assistant AG and you've got a cushy retirement coming, but then you decide to make a change, and the company that hired you after 3 years decides, hey, we maybe don't need Kristen as much. So that's more of a test of faith. What kept you grounded in your faith and trusting in God, even though you still had a mortgage to pay, you still probably had tuitions to pay, you had kids in activities, and maybe the jobs weren't rolling in, the offers weren't rolling in, but you mentioned your faith and trusting God. How did you keep that top of mind? And what's a good tip you could share with others who are going through those types of challenges?
So probably during the time, I didn't identify as much what part of my faith it was. I would say that was probably the crucible you go through to go, do you really have faith? So there was some stress included in all of this, for sure. And during that testing of faith, there's no place to turn but to God. You don't turn to anybody and go, oh, this is happening to me, or, get upset or angry. You just have to stay focused and say, okay, this has got to be you, Lord. Like, I'm being tested, and even the word trust could be difficult when you're going through so many changes at once and everything's happening, but in your core that there's something there. Like, God's there. You're just like, wow, look at these tidal waves coming, and look at, so just, try to take a deep breath, take each day one day at a time, make sure God is front and center every morning, take a deep breath and say, okay, Lord, today is today. I'm going to go along with whatever today brings. And so I believe it's really simplifying, and your faith being tested. You just take one day at a time. There's no planning. You just take one day at a time.
It's really good. I can see where the clarity is so important to you, because you're really clear. Hey, I'm going to let it come at almost organically, right? You didn't push too much, and then God gave you a great answer to an interview question, right?
Yeah.
Probably, I see you as you smile readily, and you're a friendly person, but you're probably not the comedian in the group most of the time. But that's a really good line, and I remember when Moses says, "What am I going to say?" He had a studying problem, and he didn't have confidence to be able to go to the Pharaoh, right? But God said, "Hey, I will give you the words," right? It's kind of what happened here. Now how long have you been at the foundation, Kristen?
So this would be 6 years now.
So 6 years. What was the biggest difference you saw from working as an attorney, practicing law, to what you're doing now? What's carried over that you say, it's very similar to getting ready for a big case is getting ready for a big donor, maybe, and what's so completely different?
Ooh, good question. Let me reflect on that for a minute. What's different is actually working in a church organization. Have to say there's a distinction between your corporate world, government world, and your church world, if I can put it that way. I believe coming in, I had rosy glasses. I love my faith. Everything's going to be like our faith. And, everything that you would imagine, or I could imagine, like, wow, I get to work in the church. I love the Lord. I love Jesus. And, but yeah, you know what? Our church is made up of broken people. I'm broken. we work together in as much as we allow our brokenness to be seen and to be part of our leadership. And so that's not necessarily the truth. That's not actually true in a corporate world. Your corporate world, you're driven by profits. Everybody knows what the game plan is. Everybody has got an idea what the structure is, what the rules are, what the cadence is, what the expectations are. Government's a little bit the same. While it's not for profit, you kind of know what everybody's supposed to be doing. You kind of know, what your responsibilities are. You just have the game plan, the game book, so to speak. Our church has been working on its game book. Well, let's put it this way. The game book was written 2,000 years ago, the Bible. Okay. It's from there, every person has different gifts and charism that the Lord has provided, that the Lord has gifted us with. And when you put all this into one pot, and we're all trying to figure out where we belong, how we belong, what we're supposed to be doing, the clarity isn't quite there. So it took me quite a while to get clarity about how does the church, the worldwide church, how do we work together for the mission that Jesus set forth for us? And there's so many levels of, I want to say complication, but there's just so many levels and layers of personalities and gifts and resources that it took a while to get clarity. I think the clarity was very simple at the state. Clarity was a little bit, not difficult, but an adjustment for working in a corporation. But to get clarity here in the church, boy, that took even more, understanding, more, I want to say research, but, understanding the faith, reading the saints, just seeing how our family as Christian Catholics really keep the house together. We don't, God does. Let's just put it that way. The house would be falling in on us, but God keeps the house in structure.
Yes.
So that was the biggest challenge, is getting clarity. Like, what is going on around here? Like, none of this makes sense.
I love that you're talking about clarity, because it's your how. And one of the things that we theorize, us coaches who follow the YOS discovery, is your how is really what shows up, because it's how you do everything, and you seek clarity. And until you have clarity, you're not comfortable. And
right.
So you continued, you mentioned saints. Which saint helped you gain the most clarity as you read the saints and you were on this journey?
So there are several saints that have journeyed with me along the way. I can tell you the most recent one will be Joan of Arc.
Oh,
we're made for this time. We're made for this time. And that's just recently. She wasn't really on my front of thoughts or front of prayers. Let me go back a few years when I first started here. I love St. Therese of Lisieux, the little flower. Mary, that's it. Mary, our Mother Mary. That was it. She has been, for all of my life, that sure, reliable, loving, dedicated. You can't describe Mary and what she brings when you're one of her little ones. Yeah. So I would say Mary is the top of all the saints for me. She invites me to learn a little bit more about different saints here and there, depending upon the circumstances. So, like I said, top of mind right now, it would be Joan of Arc. That would be it. And so there you go. But Mary, there's no question. I've been praying the rosary for every day for probably more than 15, 20 years at least. First Saturday devotions became very important back in the day, probably, right when my children were born. Probably every consecration to Mary you can find out there, I've read and participated in. You know what I mean? The consecrations, there's usually a group, process. Right. Yep. Consecration to Mary, Our Lady of Carmel, the most important, the most memorable, and I would say the most incredible, undescribable journey I took last fall. And it was all about Mary, Fatima, Our Lady of Montserrat, Lourdes, Our Lady of Pilar, Santiago, St. James, Book of St. James. There's a saint right there. And St. Ignatius of Loyola. Now that I think about back in the days, like
Yes.
couple dozen, St. Ignatius of Loyola taught me very much how to discern, and kind of the discernment of spirits is very
Yes.
important for making decisions and being well in a place to make that decision. So
I can totally see how Ignatius and you would connect with the need for clarity, because his discernment is so I mean, there are so many different ways to discern, right? And so
yes,
many different ways to look at desolation versus oh gosh, what's the opposite of desolation is
consolation.
consolation,
Yes.
and making sure, and then there's different phases of each one. So I can see where somebody who seeks clarity would Ignatius of Loyola would be a great saint. And you mentioned some great ones, so thank you very much for sharing that with us. Tell me what was similar. So you talked about the challenges. What was it that you were able to take from your law career that you use today, and you're like, it fits in either office. I need, that's a skill that I'm so glad I gained during my law career, my law practice, or my law school, that I use in my work as an executive director of a Catholic foundation.
Oh yeah, that's easy. And it even started before being a lawyer, the truth. I was an auditor, CPA, and auditors, if you don't know anything about auditors, every single evidence of why that decision or that entry was made, you need supporting documentation. So you can trust that, yep, they put $1 million purchase in there. Here's the supporting documentation. I trust that number. So auditors build that through their process of auditing. Likewise, as an attorney handling cases, going to trial, you have to build your case. You have to start simple and start building it step by step by step by step, so that when it finally reaches a point where you're asking a judge or a panel of judges or a jury to make a decision, they have no question to doubt it. Every single hole has been filled in. I say every single, of course, there's no perfection, but your point is you've done everything to bring them to a point where that decision, they're making a good decision and they can trust you for that. So not unlike any, that is all carried through, because when I joined the foundation, it had been, I would guess you would say, a ship a sail without a captain for quite a few years. Let's just put it that way. So everybody had a little bit of, well, we should do it this way. And no, you got to do it this way and do it this way. And I'm like, time out. Let's figure out let's go back to the corporate documents. Let's look at our bylaws. Let's start with the basics. What are we supposed to be doing? And let's do that. So along the way, there were people who didn't necessarily agree with or like that I was doing that. But the key strength to all of this was my board. I was absolutely 100% making sure every step along the way, my board had a complete clarity and understood why we were taking each step. And so even in the face of pushback and resistance from others, my board stood behind me 100%. And, they stood by me 100% because the organization is what was the reason and the purpose and the goal for doing everything we did. There were a lot of challenges during that time, though. So,
I can imagine.
But
I like the way truth really becomes your guiding, and how appropriate for someone who has a what of trust. And you mentioned clarity. I think when everything is clear and documented well, and you make sense of it and you can explain it to everyone, it's a lot easier to build that trust. So you use both the organizations. Before we go, I know we're running a little we're running over time a little bit. I do want to get into leadership
Okay.
because that's the name of the podcast is To Lead Different. I don't know how much time you've spent in leadership, but you're leading an organization now. What are you doing differently in terms of your leadership today than you did maybe when you first took over? How have you evolved as a leader, and what are you so glad that you're doing?
Okay. So evolving as a leader, first as an attorney, I want to point that out. When you're the lead attorney, everything is your responsibility. The witnesses, the jury instructions, the briefs, the evidence, what appears when you appear in front of a judge, your client, their witnesses. So everything is your responsibility, period. That's it. Of course, you've got attorneys down you can talk to about stuff, but it's primarily it's your responsibility. My responsibility when I was an attorney. At the corporate level, there was a different level of responsibility, but there was a different leadership. I led other attorneys who worked for our corporation, and it was kind of like delegating in a way. There was an adjustment there. Like, yes, it's my responsibility, but we have to hire the right people, and what I do is making sure we have the right people in place. So there was a little bit of a delegation and trust because it was just a change. So as a leader in this organization, having started out with just 2 staff and now we're up to 4, it's a new leadership for me. Yes, everything's my responsibility, but I am responsible for giving those who are working with me the resources, the ability, the discretion, their own leadership for their position to grow as individuals. And so as a leader, that's my role in a way, is to create leaders for their area of responsibility or, their passions and their dreams. So the less I give them that opportunity to be leaders, I believe the less effective I am as a manager or as a leader. I believe I shared this with you. Go forth and be great. Literally, my team, I want them to be great at whatever they do, have the resources, balance work and family, make sure that the work isn't like becoming like burdensome or overbearing, because a good work-life balance creates good leaders as well. So I would say giving my staff, who I lead, that ability to be leaders. And they go forth and be great. We all know what we're supposed to be doing. And of course, I meet with them every week, one-on-one, say, hey, what you got? How's it going? Do you need any help? Do you have any struggles? Is there something you're bouncing around? And 9 times out of 10, when they share with me something that they might be thinking about, I say, what does your gut say? Like, what's the right thing to do here? What is, I turn it back to them. And I would say 99.9, well, 90% of the time, even more, their decision about how to handle them, like, go for it. Like, yep, how's that, does that fit with everything? So there's your answer. I could keep going, but there you go. Because it's a good question, because I hadn't really reflected that much detail in that much depth before.
That was a really great answer, and I kind of see the evolution, right? And when you're the lead attorney, everything's your responsibility, and you're probably overwhelmed because even though you have other attorneys you're working with, it's your witnesses, your testimony, your evidence, everything belongs to you. And it reminds me of something I learned in the military. You can delegate authority. You cannot delegate responsibility. It's still on you. You can tell someone else, hey, you're in charge of that. But if they screw up, guess what? It's still Kristen's responsibility. So you went from that place where you're kind of hanging on to everything. And even though you delegate some, but then you went into corporate where there was more of a delegation because you were hiring people. And so you learned to depend on people and maybe even trust them a little bit more. So you probably had a process you took people through. So you were clear on what they were doing in order for you to be able to trust them. But then I see this final evolution where you are today and you're developing leaders. And you know, I've got to tell Sunil, that's got to be the title of this podcast. Go forth and be great. I think we're going to put that in bold headlines, because go forth and be great is such a great motto, such a great rallying cry. We want to make sure we highlight that. But now you talked about, as a leader today, not only are you, sounds like you're listening more. And you're allowing people to kind of solve their own problems, which is a real evolution for somebody with the why of make sense. Because I can tell you, you're nodding your head. I bet when you were a young attorney, you liked to, you know, people brought you problems and you said, here's what we got to do, because you could process it really fast. And I think that probably still goes on in your head. You know exactly what they have to do, but now you're walking your leaders that you're developing through that problem solving process by asking them questions and getting them to come up. So now you're only verifying what they wanted to do versus giving them a solution, which probably was the same solution anyway. But I know this as a leader, people support what they help build. And so if you walk them through that process and it's their idea, they're gonna go out and just kill themselves to make sure that it succeeds, because it was their idea that they had input. And Kristen allowed me to come up. She took my suggestion, which probably was your solution too, but it's their suggestion and you helped them bring through it. I really like that. I was listening to an interview, Dr. 𝘰𝙩𝙩, who's a doctor on the Golf Channel, but he's done some work with African tribes and their leadership models. And, you know, they're elite athletes, some amazing runners, and they're hunters. And he said, you know, he talked to a chief and he said, what's the most important job of the chief? And the chief said, the most important job of the chief is to find the next chief. And you can't do that if you're telling them what to do. You do that when you're approaching it the way Kristen Smith does, by developing leaders. You see that as a mission almost, right? It is your mission to develop those next leaders, because as much as you're enjoying it, Kristen, you're not going to be here forever. None of us are. Right. So we've got to develop that next generation. That's a really great answer. What's something that I haven't asked that you want to make sure we talk about? I know I haven't asked. I wanted to hear your updated mission, which is your reverted mission. You had a mission and then it got changed, but now you have a new mission. Let's talk through that real quick. The mission of the Archdiocese Foundation right now.
So the Catholic Community Foundation here in the Diocese of Saginaw is approaching its 20-year anniversary next year. And part of planning for that has included a lot of scanning of documents, review of documents, and really understanding who we are, where we started, how did we get where we are, and where are we going. So I just happened to come across the mission of our mission back from when we were founded back in 2006 by Archbishop Carlson. And our mission: guided by gospel values and the teachings of the Catholic Church, the Catholic Community Foundation develops and manages funds to secure and further God's work in our communities.
How does that resonate with you?
That speaks very well to what we do and how we do it and why we do it.
So how had you, I mean, and I wouldn't even say straight, because you mentioned it earlier. We're all broken people. And at the end of the day, we're all people, whether you're working in the faith community, in a corporate environment, or at the Attorney General's office. We're all people at the end of the day. Broken people, yes, and we've all got strengths, challenges that come with those strengths. Overuse of some strengths can sometimes become an issue. So how, as you've dealt with the people and you've become this great developer of future leaders, and you have a motto of go forth and be great, what's the biggest lesson you've learned in terms of dealing with people? And let's just call it with the broken people, and understanding, hey, that's where they need some healing. And so let's take advantage of here are some strengths that they still have. What's your biggest people lesson that you've learned as a leader?
So my biggest people lesson I've learned as a leader is to lead and minister and help the people who, for lack of a better word, I'm responsible for in my organization. We interact with a lot of different organizations, schools, parishes, the diocese, and everywhere there is someone who you could minister to. Okay. And in that short amount of time we have to interact, or it could be longer, but mostly it's not like like part of my team and staff are together every day. But for those who need healing, or give any opening that they're hurting, you just try to give that momentary, can we pray? Can I pray for you? And hopefully give them a glimpse or a glimmer that God loves them. And that's just one of the, seeds along the way where we've heard, the Lord does the growth, the Lord does the healing. We may be part of a long journey that person is going through. But if we can bring a moment of God's intimacy, that they're loved, that's what we do. And because we're working in the church, those opportunities are more freely shared, I believe, as opposed to being a corporation or working for the state. Because I believe most people are drawn to the church, as I believe it was our beloved Pope Francis had said, this is missionary field. We are out here, help those. I don't have his exact words, but I remember hearing them. I'm like, you're right. In the church, we are where people come to be healed. Right. And they may not always find that. We've heard of all the scandals, but if we can be one of those moments to reveal that God's love is there for them as well, we can play our part in the mission that God has put before us.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much, Kristen. I love that answer. I love the thoughtfulness of this interview. You have been great. There's so many great lessons here. Go Forth and Be Great is my favorite, but there's so many good lessons here. And I love the way you finished with talking about helping people along their journey and incorporating the faith into it. So what do you say we end the interview on that note, Kristen?
Why not?
I love that. Guys, if you're still here, those of you that are still listening, I want to make sure and remind you to subscribe to the podcast, share it with your friends. Kristen, we're going to give you an opportunity to share clips and share it with your network. If you enjoyed the podcast, make sure you give us a like, make sure you subscribe, because that's how we get this message out to as many people as possible. Kristen, you have been an amazing guest. I had no doubt you would be, but I love the journey you took us on from your time as I did not realize you were an auditor before you were an attorney, before you were a corporate, before you were an assistant AG, before you were a corporate attorney, and before you were an executive director, doing God's work for the Catholic Community Foundation of Michigan. So thank you so much for being here with us today. We look forward to talking to you some more. And guys, don't forget to continue to lead different. Be like Kristen. Come up with your own motto. Be energetic, be positive, and make a difference in the lives of others. Thank you so much, Kristen. We will see you all next week with another episode of the Lead Different podcast.
Thank you, Dan.
This is Lead Different.
Subscribe now. Discover a new era of leadership. Lead different, because great leaders change the world.